To start with, I'd like to move us far away from here for a moment and position ourselves in the deep mountains of Alaska, in the northern Arctic Circle. There, for the last 5 years or so, what people have started to notice is that some rivers are turning bright orange. And this phenomenon, which is creating this beautiful and otherworldly landscape, is problematic. It's problematic because this beauty is actually quite toxic. It's deadly even, I should say. So this actual photo here was actually taken in Canada just to show that this is not just like limited to Alaska. But what's happening in general is that because of climate change, the Arctic Circle is inducing like a melting of the ice cap, which is exposing rocks, very ancient rocks, that are full of minerals and metals to air. And with this natural weathering, metals like coppers, zinc, and iron are saturating the waterways and giving them this bright, milky orange color. So what researchers are noticing is that the local flora and fauna can survive this toxicity and this acidity. And that humans can no longer drink this water, which was one of the purest drinkable water reserve we had. And as I told you before, the reason why this is happening is because of climate change. But the root cause of this phenomenon is obviously human activity. And as we've known for quite some time now, humanity is the principal driver of most of the environmental issues the planet is currently facing. And what you can see on the graph here is that this is not getting any better. In fact, just earlier this month, we passed this infamous frontier of 1.5 degrees of average warming globally over the 1 year period. This is happening way ahead of schedule, and we're definitely not ready to deal with this. And of course, we're still far from the catastrophic scenarios that are associated with further temperature increases. And for some people that are lucky enough to live in developed societies or that have the financial means to escape the heat, this can even create some enjoyable opportunities. But climate change obviously is more than just global warming. It's also extreme weather events and soon poverty, hunger, displacements, and so forth. So as what is this to do with design is the question that Chris was also talking about. Well, everything, if you ask me, because there's an overused sentence that says everything around us has been designed. The theater that we're sitting in, the clothes that we're wearing, and the cities and societies that we live in as well. So through consumption and construction, design is intimately linked to human activity and environmental degradation. And if conventional design contributes to climate change and biodiversity loss, the first question that jumps to mind is, are there better ways of designing that are more respectful to people and planet? And nowadays it takes about one ChatGPT prompt to figure out that the answer to this question is yes. And if the answer is yes, well, a better question might be, how can we scale up alternative ways of designing that are more respectful of people and planet? So this has become my overarching research question at MIT University, and I've been literally thinking about this for 30 years. So here on screen is a newspaper article from June 1995, and in the circle there, there's a photo of me when I was age 19 and an architecture student back in France, in the southern French city of Montpellier. And in almost a very stereotypical way, rebellious Frenchman, probably smoking a cigarette there as well. I joined that year the Green Party and to basically be part of the local election, knowing full well that I have no chance of getting elected, of course, but very happy to be surrounded by this fabulous group of people that were thinking about embedding new ways of thinking, ecological thinking, into local politics. So fast forward 29 years, 1 month and 23 days, and here I am today on stage. Still trying to embed ecological thinking somewhere, but this time in design practice. And as a senior lecturer in design at MIT University, I developed over the last few years a transdisciplinary practice for regenerative urban future. And I'm aware that we have a lot of emerging designers in the room today, so I'm going to explain first what transdisciplinary means before moving on the topic of today, which is regeneration. So in 2017, I did this installation for Science Gallery Melbourne on the topic of our relationship with blood. And people were prompted to enter this space that was designed to kind of help them question their relationship with blood and the taboo of blood. So as they entered the space, this technological device at the back was prompting them to smell the scent of blood, which was obviously fake, a scientific compound. And as they were tuning up, a Kinect camera captured their facial expression to understand how they were feeling. Then this data, thanks to like a program executed by Microsoft, we had a partnership with them, was telling them how they were feeling, and we were changing the color of the room to reflect this emotion, prompting them to think about their relationship with blood. And I know that has nothing to do with regeneration, but I just wanted to explain what transdisciplinary was. So in this piece, you can see that this piece is at the intersection of art, design, science, and technology. And very simply, this is the meaning of transdisciplinarity, a practice that does not belong in one specific field, but uses knowledge and methods from various disciplines to create new content or new knowledge. So American bioarchitect Neri Oxman talks about this very eloquently in her 2016 paper called The Age of Entanglement, where she basically says that we've reached peak knowledge in every single discipline, and it's only through the merger of discipline that we can find the potentials to address the multiple crises of our time. I personally believe that this approach to practice is very important when it comes to regenerative development. So moving on to regenerative design, which is a very zeitgeisty in 2024, you'll hear that word a lot. One could say that this is a very holistic, transdisciplinary field of practice. And when I made the jump back at the start of 2019, after this project with Science Gallery, I really wanted to spend some time to define what it meant for me, which I did through this speculative utopian retrofit of a city skyscraper, which you can see on screen now. And I also wrote quite a bit. So one of the main things that I wrote about is that most of the answers we're looking for possibly exist in nature already, and that there is a distinction between designing with, designing for, and designing as nature, and I'll go back to that in a moment. I also wrote about the fact that the best answers probably lay beyond the human perspective, which is something that you may have heard of under the term of more than human design. And that piece of knowledge alone led me to publish a paper with a few friends and colleagues just last year in Design Study that frames my regenerative practice and that proposes 5 principles to design conditions for coexistence between the living and other living and non-living things. So very briefly, top line, these 5 principles are designing with living systems, adopting an ethic of care, applying circular and regenerative design strategies, embracing pluriversal thinking, and relinquishing control, which is a big one in design. And I wish I had more time to go into the detail of those. This is a full lecture, but I'm going to move on and see if you have any questions. Feel free to ask me anytime during the semester or after. To the point, I'm going to offer like the simplest definition that I could find for regenerative design, which is regenerative design is a system-led and place-based practice that aims to unlock potentials for planetary health and well-being. Now, as we talked about, this isn't new knowledge, and regenerative design is actually quite ancient. It's been practiced by civilizations past, even before design was called design. And the main question nowadays is how do we scale this up? Because this knowledge may be ancient, but it's not well distributed. And it also goes against all the fundamental principles of today's societies. And perhaps the best way to start this conversation is to understand how it differs from other design practices. So here on screen, we have a start of a framework that has been drawn by a regenerative architect called Bill Reed in 2007. And this is the part of the presentation where I'm going to ask for your attention for 3 slides. This is a very simple and elegant 2x2 at its core, with a continuum from high carbon emission and thoughtless consumption to low carbon emission and thoughtful consumption on the x-axis, and another continuum from degenerative to regenerative system on the y-axis. And once we understand this axis, we can position conventional design as we practice it today in the lower left quadrant, where it is contributing to most of the problem that we're now familiar with. And the first thing that we notice is that there are quite a few steps between conventional and regenerative design. And first we go through green design, which is basically doing the bare minimum while still trying to maximize profit. Then, of course, next to that is sustainable and circular design, which is basically trying to make things better and neutral. And I'm going to explain this through an example to make it simple. Circularizing plastics still maintains our reliance on plastics, which we know is terrible for human health and ecosystem health. Full circularity as well is a bit of a pipe dream, I must say, because material quality typically degrades when recycled, which means we always need to supply and supplement recycled stocks with virgin material. And I'm not saying this is bad. I think like every solution are needed, and I think Simon is going to talk about this in a moment, so you'll hear more about this very soon. But basically the goal is low carbon and thoughtful consumption through regeneration, which is a state where the system in which we live in is both resistant and resilient. So system resistance means that a system can absorb a shock, and this can be any kind of system, ecological, social, or financial. And system resilience means that a system can bounce back from a shock. How fast is it going to take us to bounce back from the cost of living crisis that we're living in at the moment? Now, call me biased, but I actually believe that the paper that we published last year on designing conditions for coexistence offers potentially some solution in there in order to move towards regenerative states. So how do we get there? Well, we can start by designing with nature. It's not ideal, and it won't get us all the way to regeneration, but we have to remain optimistic and start somewhere. So earlier this year, there was this big economic study that revealed that the biomaterial market is currently worth $45 billion US, and that by the end of the decade, it's projected to grow by another 20 billion. So as a testament to this like renewed interest in biomaterial, this is not new. The National Gallery of Victoria just purchased this stunningly beautiful cabinet from a Mexican designer called Fernando Lapos, which is made of timber and avocado leather. In Melbourne again, and I'm not doing like any specific like advocacy for non-animal leather or anything, but we coincidentally have also another startup, Alt Leather, that is raising funds by the millions to create a commercially viable plant-based leather for design and manufacturing. And we also had our own successes at the MDiT, by the way, with 3 of our students winning a Victoria Premier Design Award in 2020 for a bio-based non-woven textile that was a concept for healthcare. So this project came from our biodesign studio, and this same year, I also won the 2020 Biodesign Challenge Outstanding Instructor Award in New York City for my mentorship of the project. And like quick scoop here, I will tell you that Charlotte and Zoe have left and moved on to better projects, but Tanuj in the middle and myself are now collaborating to make this project a reality. So another biomaterial that I'm working on at the moment is this novel timber-like alternative that is made of organic industrial waste. The key component here is bacterial cellulose. I'm doing that with an industry partner called Social Living, which is based in Thomastown, just not far away from here. For IP reason, I can't tell you more than showing you what these 2 images are, but that's it. But like, feel free once again to ask me a question offline, and I'll be more than happy to answer. Now, as I told you, designing with nature is not the end goal and comes with its own sets of issues. Like conventional design practices, it can also be linked to non-human exploitation. It can also lead to resource mismanagement and ecosystem destruction. All of this can then fuel climate change and extreme weather events, and that doesn't even address issues of pollution and social equity. So the answer that is being proposed by the regenerative movement is for humanity to start designing within living systems, humans participating as nature. The main difference between designing with nature and designing within living system is philosophical, and simply means that we need to accept that humans are inherently a part of a meta-system called nature, and then we are bound by the biological law of this system. This sounds very, very simple, but it's actually a huge mindset shift that would deserve an entire keynote. So instead of trying to poorly summarize this knowledge in a minute, I'll simply describe a case study that I did last year as part of my attempt to reach regeneration in my practice. So in 2023, I've worked with a local hospital named Peninsula Health on a project called Safety Sandscaping that was funded by WorkSafe Victoria. And during that project, I designed and prototyped 3D knitted customizable scrubs for healthcare workers named Erin Colgan, using a hypoallergenic and biodegradable algae-based yarn. One thing you need to know is that conventional scrubs are absolutely terrible. They're made of oil-based plastics, PE and PET mainly, meaning that they pollute the environment through carbon emissions and microplastics, and they are not breathable. So a healthcare worker can spend up to 18 hours a day in them, sometimes in rather difficult situation while caring for others. This means that at the end of a long shift, they can smell rather unpleasant, and the fabric itself can induce rashes. They're also very boxy. It's a standard cut, and they don't fit most people, meaning that most healthcare workers today are working in fairly average workwear that is impacting their well-being at work. So what I did is I took the specific body measurement of a healthcare worker using a 3D body scanning technology, which allowed me to manufacture a pair of 3D knitted scrubs that were bespoke to the healthcare worker I was working with. So 3D knitting technology also helped me to minimize the material waste during manufacturing, which is not a small feat. And because the scrubs are biodegradable, they can be decomposed in an anaerobic digester to produce new bioresources such as compost or natural gas. The scrubs themselves will also do minimal harm if they were to end up in landfills, which is a massive advantage. Of course, this is only a functional prototype at this stage, and there's room for improvement. For example, the algae harvested to produce the yarn would need to be farmed regeneratively and equitably for this project to be fully regenerative. But the use of several circular and regenerative design strategies that you can see on screen here, mixed with the use of biomaterial and a more than human / designing condition for coexistence approach to practice are all helping to get closer to regeneration. So by way of conclusion, I'd like to show you these abstract drawings from Kate Toss, which is one of our recent industrial design graduates. So I asked Kate to graphically visualize the difference between designing with nature, designing for nature, and designing as nature within living systems. And most of us are now fully aware that our ways of living are no longer serving us and the planet. And while this knowledge may be paralyzing at times, interest in these new ways of designing, which we'll explore in the studio this semester, is definitely growing. So this is showcasing a strong potential for regenerative development in both design education, but also practice. Finally, to conclude, and as we navigate the evolving landscape of Alaska and beyond, and realize that generating regeneration is potentially an ambitious goal that we perhaps will never achieve, the vision it carries can hopefully be used as a driver to constantly thrive to design better future for all, human and non-human. Thank you very much.